listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. When you wander around pit lane or the paddock area of a racetrack, you'll sometimes hear the term car guy. It kind of distinguishes those who are athletes, seemingly focused solely on the contest of racing, to those who love the contest as well as having that strong connection to the wheels underneath them. Garth Tander is the latter. He loves cars. He has a muscle car in the garage at home, which we'll talk to him about on this episode, and he'll fire it up for us. On top of being a car guy, he's an impressive racer to boot. Winner of the Supercars Championship in 2007 and a multiple winner of the great race at Bathurst. Garth and I spoke at Fox Sports Studios while fittingly waiting to be on a show about cars and racing. See, I told you he was a car guy.
I'll take that, car guy. Can I put that on my bio?
You can. Like most, you started out racing karts as a youngster. By your mid-teens, there were 7 West Australian state titles in the trophy cabinet and an Aussie title as well. Can you remember your first kart and what that sensation of going fast was like? Where were you?
Oh, I remember my first go-kart. It was an old second-hand thing that Dad had bought, and we got into karting through family friends. Their kids were racing. And Dad said, we'll get the boy a kart and we'll see how he goes, because it was involved with motorsport as a mechanic and things like that. So yeah, it was an old kart. I raced. There was me and one other kid, a friend of mine, Jamie Pages. I was 8 years old, and it was in an old industrial suburb. The kart track was a dirt kart track. Started racing on the dirt originally. It was an old dirt kart track in an industrial suburb in Perth called Cuda. The track's not there anymore. And there was only 2 of us in the class, so I finished second in my first race. And then that's how I started. So I don't remember the sensation. It was over 30 years ago. But I did know from that period on that I really enjoyed it. Like, I was playing AFL footy as a kid back then as well, and you'd play footy on Saturdays, race go-karts on Sundays. And I knew pretty much from that age that was the driving was the direction I wanted to go in, because I was reasonable at footy, but by the time I got to about 10 or 11, I had to make a decision, because footy comp changed to Sundays, and I had to make a decision: do I keep racing go-karts or do I go play footy? And I chose the go-kart route. So thankful for that, because I'm still doing what I love today.
These days we only really know you as a Holden driver. The mainstream part of your life in supercars, it's always been a Holden, but back then you and your brother would travel to go-kart races in a Ford.
Yep.
Is that right? Dad had XR6s and XR8s, is that right?
Yeah, we were a Ford family. So Dad was a massive Dick Johnson fan, and Dad had XR6s. He had 2 or 3 XR6s, and by the time I got my licence, borrowed Dad's XR6 a couple of times. Cruising around. I scratched it once. I've never told him this, but I scratched it once. I was out at a mate's place, and I backed it into the letterbox or something like that.
So what story did you tell him to...
No, well, see, he didn't notice. So I got home late that night, so you do what you do is you park it close to the wall where the scratch was, so you can't see it. And I didn't tell him. And then we went out as a family. We went 10-pin bowling the next day. And he still hadn't noticed it until we'd sort of been and then we come back and...
Must have happened in the car park.
I said, Dad, what's happened to your car? Someone scratched it. And he's like, some lowlife must have scratched it in the car park, and I got away with it.
First car I ever got my hands on when I was learning to drive was Mum's 1987 VC Holden Commodore. 6-cylinder, brown with a gold stripe, beautiful. I understand the first car you bought was a VC Holden Commodore 6, is that right?
It was a VB, mate.
VB, wow, okay.
Yeah. It was a similar colour, baby poo brown.
Oh, it's exactly what I had.
I think that must have been the cheapest car at the time. Didn't last long. Went to because I was working, when I got my licence, I was already working the Formula Ford team up at Barbagallo Raceway, so the back road out to Barbagallo got quite a workout. And then I traded it actually on a because the fuel was costing me a fortune driving up and to and from the track. So in the end I traded it on a little 4-cylinder Mitsubishi Lancer And I remember driving it I was up at the racetrack, and I had to go to the dealership to swap the cars 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. And I remember I was running late, so I thrashed the Commodore on the way to the dealership, and it had got the death knock.
Oh, by the way, just in case you're wondering, a death knock is kind of when something horrendous is about to happen to the engine. It's developed a rattle or something really bad, and typically it's about to blow.
It had got the death knock up massively on the way in, so I stopped at the servo, poured some thickest oil in it that I could find, and idled into the dealership, grabbed my car, the new car, drove out, and that was it. That was, I think, the Commodore went to the Great K out in the sky after that.
They were the early days when racers are always doing it tough from a money point of view, and the focus is the racing. Did you have enough left over to do any modifications to your first cars, or did you not worry about that back then?
No, I thought I was pretty cool, so I got the oxy torch out and lowered it with the springs, lowered the car that way.
Classy.
Yeah. So the ride quality was strong, and so I did that. And then on the Lancer, Dad was trying to supplement the motor racing by started a new business with Mag Wheels, importing Mag Wheels from Italy. It was actually Fond Metal. They were a Formula 1 team at the time, and we were importing these wheels into Perth with a friend of the old man. And so I got a set of demo wheels on the Lancer and lowered that properly. I learnt from the first time that you don't lower the car with the oxy torch, so I got proper springs in the Lancer, but lowered it really, really low. And put an exhaust on it as you do, so it was really loud, really low. So it was one of those cars you can't take into car parks. That was the Lancer, which I kept all the way till when I started driving supercars, and then we sold that at the dealership at Gary Rogers and got a company car from then on.
Crazy. Like most young racers, you went from karts to Formula Ford. You won the Aussie title in '97, and then you pretty much stepped straight up to Gary Rogers and supercars. Other people went different directions, Formula Holden, whatever. Was that a dream come true? Was it daunting? What was that like at the time?
Yeah, all of the above. And it wasn't straight in, because we won the championship in '97 in Formula Ford, and it was large. We had sponsors, certainly, but largely the Formula Ford deal was all funded by Mum and Dad. I think Dad did a lot of shonky stuff with the finances that Mum didn't know about. In the end, we finished that. We won the championship, which obviously very fortunate, but there was no money left at all, no funding left at all to do anything racing wise. So I finished '97 as Australian champion in Formula Ford, driving for Fast Lane Racing, and I was working for those guys full time as well as driving. So I basically just was working full time. I was working on
in an engineering kind of capacity.
Yeah. Well, we had just based out, like, it was Perth based, and the year that I did it, we were based in Perth, and then we set up another truck and we had some warehouse space in Melbourne, and I spent the first 3 months of '98 sleeping in the sleeper of the truck and working on 3 Formula Fords in this warehouse in Melbourne. And when those 3 cars were Christian Murchison, Tim Lay, who I'm still very, very good friends with today, and Leanne Ferrier, who's now Leanne Tander, my wife. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a waste, those first 3 months of not racing, because I obviously met my wife, but it was tough because you're sitting on the sidelines as the reigning Australian champion, and you're working on those cars still, and no career progression from Formula Ford. But then the opportunity came up with Gary's in April. Steve Richards left the team. He got an opportunity with Nissan Motorsport in the UK to drive in their 2-litre program when British touring cars was at its peak back then.
Nissan Primera, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was with Nissan, and that left an opening at GRM, and Jason Barguana was there driving in the second car. And when I won Formula Ford, Gary had always sponsored a Formula Ford with Valvoline money, and that Formula Ford in '97, the year that I won, was Marcus Ambrose, and he finished second behind me in the championship, and Marcus had left and gone to the UK to race over there in the UK, and so Gary knew who I was because I beat the Valvoline Formula Ford, so he gave me a call, and I dead set thought it was my mates playing a prank on me.
What did you say?
I said, yeah, righto, mate, no problems. I'd never spoken to Gary in my life, and it was one of those, yeah, okay, mate, no worries, yeah. And then in the end, I was like,
this could be real.
A minute or so into the conversation, like, oh, this sounds like it's real. I better recover this situation. And yeah, but like literally, I had spoken to Gary for 5 minutes on the phone, and I was on the plane. So this phone call was on a Friday, and I was on a plane the following Monday, and we tested at Winton on the Tuesday.
What were those initial impressions of a supercar like? I mean, they're raw, so much more power than a Formula Ford. They're the thing that all young Aussie race kids in karts and things generally aspire to, unless they're going to go down the Formula One path. They're an addictive thing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And for me to be a professional racing car driver was only ever going to be here in Australia. I mean, we didn't have the funding to continue my driving here in Australia ourselves, let alone go to Europe or America and try and crack it internationally. So to stay as a professional race car driver, it was going to be Supercars here in Australia, and this opportunity came up. And I'd already driven a supercar a couple of times. I'd had a test with Dick Johnson Racing in '97 through John Bow. He'd teed that up. And I did about 20 laps at Malala in a DJR Falcon. I had done about 10 laps prior to that in a Falcon in Perth, an ex-Glen Seaton Falcon that was locally owned. And then I had done about 10 to 15 laps in the Holden Young Lions Commodore at the end of '97. So my entire supercar testing career was about 40 laps prior to driving for GRM. And I certainly didn't sort of have my head around it a lot at the start of the day, because the cars are so wildly different. You're getting out of a 500 kilo, 100 horsepower Formula Ford into a 600 horsepower, 1350 kilo sedan-based locked diff, very little power steering, quite agricultural really, race car that completely different. So it took me most of the day to get my head around it. But in the end of the day, I think I got reasonably close to Barks' time. He was testing there as well the same day. And yeah, got my head around it. And that was on a Tuesday. I had a meeting in Gary's office on the Wednesday, and he said, "Do you want to race this weekend?" It was Phillip Island. So within 7 days, I'd gone from no prospect of driving a supercar on the Friday morning to speaking to a team owner for the first time, to testing his car, and then racing his car the following weekend at Phillip Island.
That is Gary Rogers in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to come back because I picked up on your test there with Dick Johnson. As you and I sit here recording this, we're at Fox Sports. There's a Legends show happening at the moment with Fred Gibson, Alan Moffat, Jim Richards, absolute legends of the game. Was Dick the main influence for you or inspiration?
Actually,
or was it someone else?
It was. I was certainly, as a very young kid, it was, because Dad was a big Dick Johnson fan. So I mean, we did that test for DJR at Malala, and Dad was like a kid in the candy shop. He came to that day and he's running around getting photos and carrying on, like doing the full embarrassing dad thing. For me, my influence growing up, probably more so was Jim Richards. Once I was sort of, old enough to sort of understand the game myself and my influences, it was Jim. So, that was, getting to know Jim through my career has been, for me, one of my highlights, regardless, up there with Bathurst wins and all the rest of it. Just, I'm very good mates with Steve Richards, and I see Jim socially every now and then, and having a beer with Richo is pretty cool.
He's incredibly versatile. I mean, he's going to turn 70 this year in 2017. He's still racing. He was called affectionately in the public eye Gentleman Jim for a long period of time, but you talk to the racers and they say he's anything but a gentleman. He's quite on track. He doesn't muck around, does he?
No, it's great, isn't it? Actually, when we were here, they were doing the pre-meeting for the Legends show, and the term Gentleman Jim came up, and Alan Moffat, Mike Raymond, Fred Gibson, they all just pissed themselves laughing because Gentleman Jim, my ass. But to talk to him is the most quiet, most unassuming guy, and like you said, really incredibly versatile. And mate, you could have a coffee with Richo, and he would ask you all about his world, and you'd have no idea that he has been as successful and as revered internationally as he has been. I mean, I've known Steve's kids for a very long time, since they were growing up, and it's actually been funny watching them, as I reckon it's probably only in the last 3 or 4 years that Clay and Priya have realised that their granddad is actually a pretty cool thing. He's a pretty cool dude. So, like kids, you're growing up, it's just granddad.
Yeah. Let's go to 2000 Bathurst. You win the great race for the first time for Gary Rogers. Crazy day, weather-wise. To top it all off, you got burnt too, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the team radioed me. I was in the car. Back then, they were sort of 33 lap stints on a tank of fuel, and I was in the car with about 60 laps to go, and then they called me up about 45 to go and said, "How do you feel about doing a double stint? We think it's going to be better for you to be in the car at the end of the race."
Just give our listeners an idea, how long roughly is that in the car?
Oh, it's 2 hours 40, something like that.
Which is hard going.
Yeah, it was, and I was like, I was 23 at the time. You're you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. So yeah, man, I'll do that, no problems. And on my car, that year we'd been running a side exit exhaust. So they were quite in their infancy back then. Like not a lot of teams were running just single exit exhaust out the passenger side for weight distribution. So, but for Bathurst, the team were worried about that muffler lasting 1,000 kilometres. So they went back to the old tried and tested dual exit exhaust. So literally a muffler right under your backside. And they didn't put any of the heat shielding back in that you normally would run. So when we were doing 33 lap stints in the first part of the race, it was fine. You'd get out of the car and that was a little bit uncomfortable, but no dramas. But then when we did this double stint at the end of the race, I literally burnt my backside, like literally, and it was the size of decent. It was like a decent sized pancake. It was not a little one. I couldn't. Basically, after the race, I couldn't sit down for 2 months afterwards. It was pretty significant. And as a 23-year-old kid, you're not going to tell anyone that your weaknesses or anything like that. So you sort of grin and bear it. But it took. I still remember Christmas, still having dramas with it. So wow. I've got a lifetime reminder of my first ever Bathurst win. It's just got to look in the mirror to see it. But
the pain was maybe made that little bit more bearable by a Bathurst win, which is huge.
Yeah, mate. It's the first time I'd finished the race. So that was my third attempt. It's the first time I'd finished it. And I remember saying to Mike XL, our engine builder at the time, which, you're 23 and super cocky, oh, mate, all you got to do is finish this race and you win it. And it's like, how hard is it? And then it took me 9 years to realise after that to get my second one that it's not quite that easy. But yeah, I was 23 years and 6 months. I was second youngest to win it at that stage. Lowndesy was 22 and 9 months or something like that. I always seemed through my career that Lowndesy'd always beat me to these career milestones or these first stats by about 6 months. So, but yeah, it was amazing. Obviously, GRM's first ever Bathurst win. Gary is a lot like Alan Moffat. The year is. Bathurst is equally as important as the entire other 11 months of the year. And there was always a lot of preparation and a lot of focus put on the Bathurst race. So for him to get that win, certainly in that year as well, we were pretty close in the championship. We didn't quite get it, but to get the Bathurst win, it was really satisfying. Share the car with Bugs, get the win. No one really thought that it would work because he's 3 foot tall and I'm 10 foot tall, but we made it work.
This is Greg Rust and you're listening to Rusty's Garage. In this series, I speak to some of the most passionate enthusiasts I know, like actor, comedian, car and bike lover Shane Jacobson.
If you gave me the DeLorean now and said, Shane, where are we going? The answer would be back to when I was 18 to get rid of that freaking TE Cortina, because it's the most embarrassing thing, because as a car lover, we all know you can't help but go,
Listen to the full episode with Shane Jacobson here on Rusty's Garage.
OBD. OBD stands for Onboard Diagnostics. All modern road cars have some sort of engine computer in place that can tell you when something has gone wrong. Yeah, where's the fun in that?
I asked Jamie Whincup this question recently because he's actually gone and bought an old race car that meant something to him and restored it and has it kept away. Is there a car along the way in your career so far that you would like to own or that you've got eyes on?
I think ultimately I'd love to have the 07 championship car. We still have the 2000 Bathurst winner at GRM. Mm-hmm. That's still there, and it's still as we finish the race. So it's only been driven twice since 2000, that car, and that's up in the mezzanine display at GRM. So that's cool. Every time I go to work, I see that car there. So I'm not sure. Gary's a used car salesman. I'm not sure I'll be able to do a good deal with him on that one. He'll win in that deal. But the 07 car, I had a couple of goes at buying that off Lucas Dumbrell when he was finished with it, but he wanted too much money for it, or too much money that I could afford, so I never got it, and it's actually gone to a collector and it's been fully restored back to the 07 car. But if I won the lotto tomorrow and the lotto was big enough, that would be the car I'd go after.
What was it like driving the 24-hour at Bathurst? Because Holden built a couple of weapon Monaros, 427Cs, 7-litre, 427 cubic inch engine. They were a big tennis racket, mate, weren't they?
They were. That was taking a sledgehammer to break open a bag of ice. They were significant cars. There was a significant Holden investment in that, because obviously that was used as part of Monaro's relaunch in Australia when that car was relaunched as a road car. And GRM were the team that were tasked with building, developing, and driving them. And I was driving at GRM then, and I was part of that project from day dot. So to go to Bathurst and race there in the 24-hour race was unbelievable. But in saying that, the first race we didn't have a lot of competition. It was we had to change the fuel tank after the first 6 hours or something like that. We lost 14 laps and we caught that up. So that sort of says how quick the car was and how well prepared we were compared to the competition. But the race was in its infancy. I mean, we only did 2 races, but the race, obviously, it was first race. Second year, we went back with the second car, and Brock and Murph and Todd Kelly and Jason Bright were in the second car, and because in the yellow, that was the red car. And then in the yellow car, it was the same crew that we had the first year where we won. It was myself, Steve Richards, Cam McConville, and Nathan Pretty. So we were the guys. When the second car came the second year, we were like, oh, well, we're not going to let these blokes show up and win it, and especially Brock. We're not letting him have another one. So yeah, there was a bit of competition between the 2 cars, and we had a lot of fun. There was 8 drivers, and we all got on really well, and we had a lot of fun. But ultimately, when it came down to it, the last hour, we're trying to win it.
Stephen Richards tells me that because it's a 24-hour race, you'd have to force yourself to get some sleep. He said, I'd lie down and try and go to sleep. He said, but you could hear that distinctive sound over everything else. He said, so you'd listen and you'd hear it come back down. Okay, across the start-finish line, right, I'll try and get some sleep now, and then had to do another lap. He said it was near on impossible to sleep.
It was impossible. I think the target lap time then was around 2 minutes 15, so you had this 2 minute 15 second window to fall asleep because you'd hear it go. We'd be staying in motorhomes in the paddock behind the pits, and you'd hear it go past, yep, we're still in the race. And then you got 2 minutes to try and fall asleep before it comes around again. So we didn't get a lot of sleep. But there is another story, the first 12 hour. We had 2 motorhomes and 4 drivers, and we had this sort of rotation system. Nathan Pretty and I were sharing one motorhome, and Richo and Cam McConville sharing the other one, and that's just how it worked with the driver roster. So as each driver came in, they had to wake the other one up and they'd go have a shower and get ready to go. And Nath came in to wake me up and said, oh mate, it's all good, we're going okay, we're still going okay. And this is part of the phase where we're catching up through the race. And he goes, but I scratched it. Oh. And I said, oh yeah, okay. And I said, how is it? He goes, yeah, no mate, no problems, but it's just got a little scratch on. And I said, yeah, okay, no worries. But he said, don't worry mate, we're still trucking on okay and all the rest of it. So it was about another hour before Richo was getting out. So you're out in pit lane. The first time I'd seen the other side of the car, because it was on the driver's side that he'd scratched it, and the first time I'd seen it is when you're standing out in pit lane and the car lobs, and it's like a banana, mate. It just bent in half. And I'm like, Nathan, scratched it. Like I was like, how am I even going to open the door? Luckily the door still opened, and so then when I went in to wake him up, I wasn't kind when I woke him up. The next time I literally jumped on top of him with my helmet still on, headbutted him. So, mate, he scratched our race car. But anyway, we got the race win.
Was it a good car? What was it like?
It was a good car. Everyone sort of says, I mean, to be honest, we never really tried to go flat out with that car, except for probably the last 3 or 4 laps when Murph and I were battling at the end of the second one. But everyone sort of said, that car would go sub 2 minutes. It was such a sports sedan, such a hot rod. But it wasn't that fast down the hill. It was built to go up the hill. Mm-hmm. So at the time, it was quicker than a V8 supercar. So from the exit of turn 2 to the hump at the exit of the cutting, it was 1.5 seconds a lap faster than a supercar in just that phase of the track, because it had so much torque, mate. It would pull trees out of the ground. It had that much torque. But it was not that fast coming down Conrod. It only do 255, 260, and most of the time we were half throttle saving fuel, because 7-litre engine, mate, they drink fuel like it's going out of fashion. So most of the time we're driving the car to fuel economy numbers.
Garth mentioned Murph there before. He's another Holden hero, a proud Kiwi, and we'll talk to him on the podcast in coming sort of episodes, I guess you could say. Racing, you said before, it's in your family. You talked about your dad, your wife Leanne. She's the 2016 Australian Formula 4 champion. Does dinner time convo only revolve around race cars?
No, that's the last thing we talk about, because there is so all-consuming for the rest of our day that the last thing you want to talk about is cars and racing and all the rest of it. You need to have a bit of off time, and certainly since the kids have come along, that's now our dinner time conversation is school and school uniforms and daily excursions and which birthday party they're going to this weekend. So that's probably changed our focus a little bit. But Leanne, racing wise, she's still, last year you said she won the Australian Formula 4 Championship, which is something she'd been really keen to win. Even when she tried to win it the first time in 99 and 2000, she didn't quite get the job done then. she finished third. But I look back at what she achieved last year. She's studying full time. She's gone back to study. She's studying to be a psychologist. She's managing the household. She's effectively my PA. She manages the 2 kids, and then she went and raced and beat a bunch of kids that were 15, 16, 17 that would kill you for the next grid position and took them on and beat them soundly. I look at that and just think, man, that was super, super impressive. So you look at that, I'm a little bit in awe of what she achieved, and people will say, oh yeah, but that's your wife, you have to be. But, some people that have been involved in the industry for a long time have sort of come to me since then and said, man, what she did was pretty special. So I'm, pretty proud about that.
When you go to those races with her, you're not just supportive husband and dad, you get right involved, don't you? Are you on the tools? Are you engineering? What are you doing?
I'm on the tools, mate. I do it all. Drive the truck there, mechanic the car.
So are we talking semi-trailer? What are we talking?
No, we used to have one of them. I mean, when we had the F3, we had our own F3 team. When Leanne was racing F3 prior to the kids, and we had our own full-size 45-foot trailer.
What was it, Kenworth? What was it?
We had a Kenworth. We had our own factory. We had 3 full-time staff. We had 4 Formula 3 cars. It was starting to get a little out of control. But now we have a very, very, very tiny little Isuzu truck. We call it the bread van because it looks like a tip-top delivery truck. So I drive that. I work on the car. I engineer the car. I do the data, I do the whole shoot match, and I love it. I really do. And people say, "Oh, don't you have enough of racing?" But that's like my golf. That's my hobby. I don't play golf. I don't do other stuff. I just, when I've got downtime, I'll go down to my shed, and we've got 3 Formula Fords down there, and or the Camaro, and I'll work on that, and that's how I pass my time.
You have treated yourself to a 1969 Chevrolet SS Camaro, red from memory, muscle car. You've always wanted one, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really enjoy the history of motorsport and understanding the cars from earlier on. So, I mean, I know all about the Group C touring cars and Group A, and then that sort of led me on to learning more about American muscle cars and the Trans Am cars that raced in the mid to late 60s through that period. And I actually read Mark Donohue's book, An Unfair Advantage, Mark Donohue raced for Roger Penske. And I was reading his book, and they talked a lot about the Camaro program that they did through that period, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I've always read, the historic car classifieds, those magazines that come out, and sort of like the shape of the 69, and I was sort of watching the prices, and they were going up and up and up. And I thought, if I don't buy one soon, then I won't be able to justify spending the money. So when I got my first contract after I left GRM, because Gary won't mind me saying that he's not the biggest payer in pit lane. When I got my first contract when I left GRM, I sort of treated myself, and I bought the Camaro in 2005, and I've had it ever since. And I'm thankful I bought it then because the dollar wasn't too bad. And but I've had it since then, and it was more the racing connection that sort of drew me to that car than its street cred, if you like.
Was it here in Australia? Did you get it out of America? What state was it in when you got it?
No, it was. I bought it out of Queensland, out of the Gold Coast. It was new to Australia. It hadn't been registered in Australia. It was a fresh import. I read about it. I emailed the guy through. He was a broker. Flew up and had a look at it. And I took Leanne with me, and on the plane on the way home, I asked permission if I was allowed to buy it, because she's the accountant, she runs the books. So she said, well, if that's what you want, you can get it. So I got it, and had it ever since.
Has it been modified? Is it a 350? What are we talking?
I bought it as it's a 350 small block, manual, left-hand drive, 4-wheel drum brakes, so that's good fun in traffic, getting it to stop. I haven't done a lot of work to it. I've sort of just been maintaining it over the journey, but the plan is, and I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years, is the plan is to do a full nut and bolt resto on it, strip it completely, soda blast it, and then have a look at what needs fixing and start from scratch, and then I'll probably 4-wheel disc brake it at the same time. But I'll keep it 350 small block and keep it genuine to what it is. It certainly won't be a pro stock car. It'll be true to the era for sure.
Here you go, Rusty, a sound of SS69 Camaro, 350 small block, standard steel heads, my summer baby.
I said at the top of the chat here about you being a car guy, we've seen on social media, Garth's Garage and things like that. You enjoy working on the car, don't you? That's a fun thing for you.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what I did when I left school. One of my sponsors in go-karts owned an electronics business, which was telephone systems and satellite TV. This is pre-Foxtel. So he gave me an apprenticeship in electronics as an electronics technician, and I lasted about not even 12 months, and I just hated it. I mean, I was grateful for the job and for the opportunity, because getting an apprenticeship, was a big deal back then, but it certainly wasn't me. And I was racing Formula Ford at the time, and in go-karts I'd always worked on all my own go-kart stuff. Dad was pretty adamant on me learning about the kart by working on it myself. So I went to the Formula Ford team that I was racing with at the time and asked if there were any jobs going, and I started there. And so pretty much from, other than 12 months of throwing cables in the ground or in ceilings as a try-hard telephone guy, I was been working on cars since I left school. So I like I said before, I really enjoy it. It's my escape, if you like, and it's still heavily connected to what I do for a job.
A couple of final questions. Dream garage, would the Camaro still be in it, and what else would be alongside it?
No, my original Camaro would still be in it, but I'd build you can build a brand new 69 Chev Camaro. There's enough reproduction parts, so I'd build one that was just crazy. If someone was going to park the latest front engine Ferrari in your garage and say you can drive that for a little while, I'd take it. But it's not super practical now because I can't tow the caravan or put the kids in the back. So yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate I get to drive a race car 15, 20 times a year, which is, you get your satisfaction from driving like that. I mean, I drive a Nissan Navara on the road. I drive a diesel Nissan Navara nowadays, and that gets me from A to B, and it saves a lot of money with fuel.
It's your 20th year full-time in supercars. I'm picturing you in that Navara with a cap on. 20th year full-time in supercars. Does it still give you the same buzz when you go out of pit lane? And what does the future hold, mate? Because you subbed for Mark Scaife, wasn't too flash recently. He was a little crook and he missed a round of the championship, and you did a bit of commentary for us, and I think you did a superb job. Does that kind of thing appeal?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, certainly. I still part to your question with the driving stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Still love it. Still enjoy the challenge of the competition that what Supercars provides. Not only the competition from your peers, but also the competition of driving yourself to continually be better. And hey, look, to be honest, I'm probably not as fast as I was from sort of 25 to 30. That I reckon that's your peak as a driver. You've got fitness, you've got youth, you've got reflexes, you've got it all going then. I don't think I'm as good now as I was then from an outright speed point of view, but certainly I really enjoy the team aspect, getting the whole organisation working in one direction for one goal, and then when you have success as a team, the satisfaction of seeing that on everyone, seeing the satisfaction on everyone else's faces, I really quite enjoy. So I'm really enjoying the sport still. What the future holds, there's some options available. Certainly within GRM, there's some options there as far as managing the race side of the business, because Gary has a huge business portfolio away from the racetrack, and Baz will probably head more into looking after that other side of the business, and I'll potentially looking after the racing side of the business, or there's some media opportunity as well, and I enjoy that stuff. I clearly remember when I very first started, I hated it. I hated talking to the media, and it was yourself and Lee Diffie and Mark Osler and all these guys that were really, really patient with me and taught me a lot. That now I sort of, I enjoy it. I go in and they turn the bright lights on and the camera's there, and you have a bit of fun.
Well, you don't struggle. We've found that here today, and as always, mate, very insightful. Great just to chat.
Cheers, mate.
A bit of cars with you.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. Cheers.
On the next episode of Rusty's Garage, I talk with motorcycle racing legend Troy Bayliss, from his time living in Monaco, learning to speak Italian so he could communicate with his racing team mechanics at Ducati, to his return to Australia with the family.
So hard after all them years away, and then you come home and you're so used to being racing week in, week out, and maybe the spotlight. I don't know about the spotlight, but the winning or the competition. when I went down to see the team at Phillip Island for the first round of the World Superbikes, I was like so depressed. I could hardly even go into the box and speak to the guys. It just felt so wrong to even be there, and I felt like that for years. But I sort of, used to go back and test the bikes and do a bit of work with the guys, and was always thinking, no, I should be back there racing.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series producer and editor is Alex Mitchell. Audio production by Darcy Thompson.
Listener.